So this is a NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies. Here.
This building is both NASA and Columbia University.
Yeah, and he's Dr. Alex Sensei. Now, so you used to be a NASA postdoctoral program fellow.
Yes.
And now you researcher.
I'm a now NASA civil servant.
So
a yes.
civil servant.
Yes.
Okay, so please let us explain about the activities of this institute.
So we do many things here. This institute itself is there's a lot of collaboration between Columbia University and NASA, going back many decades here. But we are officially part of NASA Goddard Space Flight Center down in Maryland. And what we are doing is everything from climate observations, space-based climate observations, also looking out into space at planetary atmospheres of, for example, Titan, the moon of Saturn. We also are one of the main NASA modeling centers for climate, going back many decades. And our work is all facets of climate in terms of measurement, dynamics, physical theory, and also what my group itself is doing under the leadership of Cynthia Rosenzweig is doing climate applications. And that means we are interested in not just where is there a theoretical change, but where does that theoretical change make a difference to people and systems on the ground. So we have a lot of work for agriculture, a lot of work in urban impacts, health, air quality, infrastructure impacts. And what that means is we end up doing lots of different things. We are working on changes in climate variability, changes in mean climate, sea level rise, and we take pride in working with stakeholders themselves to not just tell them what they need to know, but to have them work with us and say, these are the pieces of information we need. And we therefore have done a lot of work in New York City with everybody from the mayor's office.
You work for the New York City government.
We did a project with the city government, and we also on that. This was the New York City Panel on Climate Change, sometimes called NPCC. And
NPCC.
I'm sure Cynthia can show you. We just published a book, and but on our steering committee or on our science committee for that were researchers, but we also were constantly interacting with 40 different government agencies and private companies. Many of the telecommunications companies were involved, and the Department of Transportation, many different government agencies. So we've worked in the city, we've worked for the New York State, doing an assessment of the wider state, which has a agricultural and water resources emphasis as well. Cynthia is leading a Northeast, something called RISA. It's a Regional Integrated Science Assessment. I believe I have that acronym right. Where basically we are the go-to researchers for climate impacts in what we call the urban corridor from Philadelphia to Boston through New York City. That whole region, whenever there is a climate impact, we would like to study it, and we have some institutional support for that from NOAA and other government agencies. And that's a partnership across many universities and researchers. We were very interested to meet with you because we are not just looking in our own backyard, but we're interested in larger issues, especially relating to agriculture. Cynthia has a long history in this field, and we are currently launching the Agricultural Model Intercomparison and Improvement Project. We call it AGNIP. I have a flyer here for you, which you're welcome to take with you.
Yeah.
And AGNIP, yes.
Oh.
And what we are doing in this project is trying to come up with a consistent integrated methodology by which we can combine the climate changes with agricultural changes and the economic impact of those changes. So this is bringing together three fields. We call it a transdisciplinary approach. This is not just working between the fields, but trying to create this new field of integrated assessment.
Integration.
Yes, and we are therefore in this project bringing together some leaders from around the world in the field of climate science, crop modeling, agricultural modeling, and the food trade models.
No.
And what we would like to do is create a set of consistent climate scenarios that are run by the leading crop modeling groups, not just from developed countries, but we want to work with people in all of the developing regions so that they are running their own farms in their own backyards, where they have a much better feel than I can sitting in New York City of when what type of methods are used for planting and harvesting and fertilizer, and what are the management practices that they are using, and the types of seed and approaches that are taken. And but if we can use a consistent approach across all of these different assessments, then we can start to link and see that if there is a certain yield increase that is seen for rice in Vietnam.
In Vietnam?
I'm just hypothetically speaking. If Vietnam sees a certain increase in rice yield under a future climate change, but Thailand and Indonesia see a larger increase in yield, then that has to be an appropriate context where now you understand that Vietnam's rise may still lead to a decline in international trade. And you can make the same argument the other direction. If Bangladesh is decreasing in their rice production and India is decreasing more.
Yeah, because of the heavy rain.
Exactly.
I stopped in Mumbai this time.
Oh, okay.
And incredibly heavy rain every day.
Yes, they've had, and even worse, of course, in Pakistan. So
Pakistan,
they've had terrible floods. So yes, I didn't bring it here. I should have brought out. I recently did a project with the World Bank in Bangladesh, looking at
World Bank.
Yes.
Recently.
And we were looking at the climate impacts. I can actually. We also just published a book. I can bring that and show it to you. So we were interested in the climate change impacts on agriculture in Bangladesh, and to address that problem, we had to look at both the field level changes in climate, so changes in temperature, changes in carbon dioxide, changes in rainfall, but also how would climate change affect the river floods? How would climate change affect the sea level? And we ended up looking at 16 different subregions of Bangladesh and trying to determine where and which crops would be most affected. And we're hoping that, by working with the government of Bangladesh and the World Bank, we can identify and prioritize adaptation strategies for Bangladesh from region to region. And of course, when we're dealing with climate change, we're often looking at changes in climate from decades out. So we do not make predictions for 5 years from now. We make projections of 20, 30, 40 out to 2100 typically. And of course, in the early decades, it's very difficult to separate the climate changes from the climate variability that is naturally occurring in the baseline or has occurred throughout history. But as you get further and further out, it becomes more clear what is due to climate change and what is just naturally occurring cycles. So we are, but one of the lessons, as I mentioned, of this Bangladesh project was we have to place it into the international context. And therefore, this AGMET project is a major international project. We have initial funding from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We've been seeking funding from the government of the United Kingdom and from the U.S. government and from development banks. And we would like to fund not only the core research and integration and the methodologies, but also developing country researchers who can participate in the project from all across Africa and South Asia, East Asia, Central Asia, and Latin America. Those are our identified regions. And we are beginning this project with a workshop this fall in October in Long Beach, California, where we've invited many people to come. And we're still trying to identify regions where we are underrepresented. So one of the things we'd like to discuss with you today is what are the crop modeling activities that are occurring in Japan, and how can we potentially work with colleagues to make sure that Japan is well represented in the project. So that is our overview here.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.